How to improve running technique is a really common question we get asked, particularly nowadays where you can have GPSs and little insoles that can tell you what your feet are doing when you go running, and also sometimes they give you recommendations. So first of all, it's about making sense of what these things tell you, but when you hear recommendations about how to run better, it's about knowing, well, is that the best thing? Because one thing that we observe is a lot of the time when people try to change running technique, it can actually make them come unstuck, particularly with starting to get pains, niggles and injuries that they wouldn't have otherwise had. So how can you make sure that you end up in a position where you can improve your running performance and technique without any of the problems? Now, this problem often occurs because people are told either they toe strike too much, so use the front of their foot, or they heel strike too much, and they're often told you do too much of one, so you've got to do more of the other. So for example, someone might be told that they heel strike too much, so they need to strike more on their front of their foot, like the ball of their foot. What we find when people usually have advice like that is they can make that change, but it often starts to overload muscles which they didn't use as much before. For example, like the calf muscle and the Achilles tendon. Consequently, because they haven't built the capacity to cope with that, they end up with an injury. Now, looking at it from a scientific perspective, what we know is that everyone will either toe strike or heel strike a tiny bit. The problem only really starts to occur when that becomes really significant. So we avoid actually telling people to make drastic changes with running technique. First of all, we develop their strength, but then secondly, we use very basic coaching cues to help them fundamentally figure out how to use that strength, that new strength, better. And again, the reason is science, cutting edge science at the moment tells us that you have something called self-optimization. That's just a fancy word to say that your body is very good at figuring out, based on the strength it has, the flexibility, to how to technically run and move best. So you should leave most of this to your body to figure out for itself once you've done strength work. However, a couple of tips that we do like to use to avoid some of these niggles that people can get is to, instead of focusing about where your foot strikes, just focus on running close to your hip. So instead of reaching out to stride, focus on getting a nice flat contact on your foot but close to your hip. That avoids what we call overstriding, because most of these problems occur when people change technique because they're overstriding. Their foot goes too far out ahead of them because they're trying to use their heel too much or their toe too much. It creates a big braking angle, which ironically slows them down. But typically, we know again through science, puts more strain on areas like the knee, but also areas like the Achilles tendon as well. So running technique can be improved, but it has to be first of all starting with developing strength in the right places. And then through using some basic drills, exercises and cues, you can help your body learn how to self-optimize and use that newfound strength in the best way to push on and to be able to run faster, quicker and without any setbacks or injuries. As always, we're here for any questions. You can comment below that you might have regarding this, or of course if you want our support, like we support lots of people like yourself with this and the strength and conditioning, please feel free to get in touch.